Hey there, Horse Center fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, we are going Kentucky Derby prep races this week.
And we are going Happy Holidays show as we approach the winter celebrations.
I was told you'd be wearing a Santa's hat today, but that didn't happen anyway. We're looking back at some of the big recent preps and the big horses pointing for preps coming up soon. Kentucky Derby right here on Horse Center. Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the outstanding pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I am good, Brian, as we approach the winter holiday season. That's what's great about racing. Racing doesn't take too many vacations.
Now, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone out there. Matt and I are happy to be coming into your living room each week, especially this week. And Matt, we're talking Kentucky Derby preps here. I'm going to throw a number out, Matt, and I want you to tell me about that number, what this number means to you. The number today, sir, is 135. Fill in the blank, Matt Shipman.
Days until the Kentucky Derby?
There you go. I knew you'd get it. 135 days until the Kentucky Derby. It seems like a long time, but these days, Matt and I can attest, go quickly. Matt, let's start with our Kentucky Derby prep show with looking back at a couple races where I think a bunch of good horses ran. We're going to start out at Los Al Futurity. It was a little over a week ago. The Los Al Futurity. I know Dior coming off that big race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He faced an undefeated Bob Baffert or two, and it turns out that once again, Matt, just as he was in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he made a nice run. He looked like he was going to get there, but Thousand Words would not let him by.
Yeah, Brian, and I'm not sure about that stretch run, if it was so much as Thousand Words not letting him by, and my reaction on that stretch run was maybe there was a little bit of hang in Anodor, and maybe that was also true in the Breeders' Cup when he finished second in there also. So I guess for me, I was a little disappointed in Anodor. I wanted to see him move forward a little bit more than he did.
Yeah, I still like him. The son of Medaglia d'Oro, trained by Blaine Wright. I mean, he's only had 3 races. Let's remember that his debut performance came on the grass at Golden Gate Fields, obviously an overmatched field where he won off by 8 lengths. Then he comes right out of that to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And then after a tough race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, not too much time goes between his third race until the third race, and that's the Los Al Futurity. Again, I thought he ran well. I'm ready to give him a little bit of leeway, but you're right. This is 2 times in a row where it looked like he probably was going to get there at the 3/16 pole, and he could never get by. So you do have to wonder. I know Dior now 1 of 3, but certainly one of the top Kentucky Derby horses in California, if not the country. Now, as for the winner, Matt, Thousand Words, we gotta talk about this son of Pioneer of the Nile, because he was a $1 million Matt yearling purchase.
Yes, Brian, and so much potential, and all of those things coming from the Bob Baffert barn make the expectations on a horse like this so extremely high. But I guess he met them well enough in here, getting a victory over a horse that we liked. Again, it was only a 4-horse field, so you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, Thousand Words, a son of Pioneer of the Nile, and of course, Bob Baffert has had good luck with sons of Pioneer of the Nile in the past, most notably American Pharoah, of course. So Thousand Words, it was a game performance by him, only his second start after a sprint, which was impressive. But again, he had to be game in that one because there was another horse who ran a big race in that maiden race. So Thousand Words has proven to be a bit of a fighter already in his 2 starts. I've seen a lot of people skyrocket this horse, this son of Pioneer and Nile. Again, $1 million yearling purchase. So obviously Baffert Liked him a lot. This is an Albaugh family stable. Usually they go to Romans. This one is in Bob Baffert's hands. 2 for 2. Really good race between two good horses. I think we're safe to say that both of these horses are graded stakes horses and both move forward on the Kentucky Derby Trail. Now, the Los Al Futurity generally has some really good horses running in it as we look ahead to the following year's Kentucky Derby. Springboard Mile, it can be a little bit more hit or miss, the race at Remington Park, but consistently they have big fields and they've had some good horses run in this race as well, Matt. And I think we saw some good horses in here. It was an 11-horse field. The first 3 horses were lopped on each other at the wire, which may or may not make you think it's a good thing. But the fact that the rest of the field, the other 8 horses, were 13.5 lengths or more behind the top 3, make me think, and the speed figures seem to have come back and reaffirmed that a little bit, that the top 3 ran very well in the Springboard Mile.
Yeah, the conclusion has to be that those are 3 horses that are pretty good horses that we're going to see move ahead, or the Springboard Mile field was not particularly distinguished and finishing so close together. We'll have to see. But all 3 of those horses ran, were sitting just behind the pace setters. There were 3 horses out there setting the early fractions, and Embolden, who comes from the barn of Michael Stidham and was making his first start from turf to dirt, was closest to those pace setters, and he gobbled them up as they came down the stretch. But then the challenges came from Shoplifted coming on the outside. Answer In had, I guess, the least positive trip out of them, had some traffic, had to dive to the rail to find an opening, which is not an easy thing for these 2-year-olds to do.
Yeah, actually, I do like the horse that finished second best of the 3 in the Springboard Mile, Matt. Now, Embolden, I'm not sure if he's a Kentucky Derby horse or not. He made his a really good 2-year-old season. It was ending in the Springboard Mile, but he really distinguished himself as a really fine turf sprinter up until this. Now, maybe this shows us that he's more than just a turf sprinter, but he ran a series of good turf sprints already at 2. And he was able to make that sharp move. And after 6-7 furlongs of this race, it looked like he might be a winner. But the other 2 rallied pretty impressively. Now, Shoplifted looked like a horse to really watch in his first couple starts. Nice maiden win. The son of Into Mischief that went to Saratoga and ran well in a graded stakes there. Didn't fare as well in California. 7th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile certainly was disappointing, the Asmussen trainer, but he bounced back, and speed figure jumped up in here, so maybe he didn't like the California tracks as much. So Shoplifted was the winner, but I do want to talk a little bit more about that second place horse that I alluded to, son of Dialed In. His name's Answer In, Matt, and his 2 races at Churchill Downs, 2 maiden races at Churchill Downs, were really good. He made up a bunch of ground in both. They were both fast times. The first one, he just missed to South Bend, who's a very nice horse. We're going to actually talk a little bit about him as we go forward. Came back and won fast time and impressively in his second race. And then in the Springboard Mile, I thought Embolden didn't make it easy for him to go either inside or outside. Finally, he went inside. And for a lightly raced 2-year-old, making only his 3rd start of his career, the way he rallied up a pretty tight hole on the rail, I thought was impressive. And wasn't far from winning the thing from Shoplifted. Again, good speed figures, good time. Answer In is becoming one of my favorite Kentucky Derby trail horses at the moment in his stakes debut now.
And good connections for a horse to become high profile in trainer Brad Cox and owner Robert LaPenta.
Absolutely. Looks like Brad Cox has another good one. Answer In might be a horse to look forward to in the futures a little bit too, because he's only 1 for 3, and he just got beaten the Springboard Mile, not a traditionally huge prep, as we said. So Answer In might be a horse you look at in the next Kentucky Derby future wager as a bit of a long shot still. All right, Matt, those are the 2 races that happened recently on the Kentucky Derby Trail. Kentucky Derby points were given out, 1,000 words, and Shoplifted will be up there on the points list already, but we've got a plethora of preps coming, and it really starts on New Year's Day. And New Year's Day is a race that the Jerome at Aqueduct is a race that we should be looking forward to for 2 words, Matt. And the 2 words are Independence Hall.
Independence Hall, the very impressive, visually and time-wise, impressive winner of the Nashua back in November at Aqueduct. He's scheduled to come back on January 1st in the Jerome at Aqueduct. I think they cut back to a 1-turn mile for the Jerome at Aqueduct. The Remsen is 1 1/8 miles, and then they go shorter before getting back to that 1 1/8 miles distance in the Wood Memorial.
Yeah, New Year's Day is the Jerome. First Kentucky Derby prep of the new year, obviously 2020. Independence Hall, Matt, I can't write anything about the Kentucky Derby these days without people talking about Independence Hall. And I understand why. I mean, the Nashua was an eye-catching and eye-opening performance. Came from out of town with a maiden race that looked pretty good, but nothing hugely spectacular by any means. And he goes into the Nashua at almost 10-1, the Son of Constitution, as you mentioned, trained by Michael Trombetta. And he just aired. He really dominated that race about as easy as a horse can do it. Won by more than 12 lengths. So he's 2 for 2 now, coming off that huge Nashua. And I think if you ask 100 horse racing fans now, who's your favorite horse, 3-year-old of turning 3 in 2020, Independence Hall might get more votes than anyone. So I want to see what he does the race after that huge-looking Nashua. Obviously, Constitution is the hottest young sire going. He's working really well since the Nashua win down at Fair Hill. So we're pretty excited to see what he does in the Jerome on New Year's Day. The weekend after New Year's is a couple of 3-year-old stakes as well, where as we run down these soon to be happening Kentucky Derby preps. Let's start out in California, because on January 4 we have the Sham, and the Sham has seen a lot of good horses over the years run in it, win it, and we might have a good one in Honor AP.
Yes, Brian, and Honor AP was so impressive with when he broke his maiden in California for trainer John Sheriffs, who, of course, for most racing fans, is known as the trainer of Zenyatta. But for those of us that have been around a little bit longer than that, we know that Mr. Sheriffs is also the trainer of a Kentucky Derby winner in one of your favorites, Brian, Giacomo.
Yeah, I guess I won some money on Giacomo in the Kentucky Derby, Matt, but Sheriffs is a top-notch trainer for years. I've always liked John Sheriff trained horses. And Honor AP, you mentioned the maiden win, and yeah, I guess it was impressive, but I still look back to his debut performance where he just got shuffled all the way back, didn't show much speed, was really far behind a big field, and made up all kinds of ground to rally for second. It was a little Zenyatta-like, if you will, Matt. Of course, he didn't win, and Zenyatta always won. Excuse me. But that performance, that debut performance, back in August, really caught my eye. And then in the next maiden race, he actually got out there on the lead. They didn't run too fast early, and he just dominated the field in a maiden race out there in Southern California. He was there was talk that he would run in the Los Al Futurity, but Sheriffs, being who he is not rushing, not pushing this handsome son of Honor Code and Hollywood Story, a really nice graded stakes winning mare. So this horse has the breeding. Didn't push this horse. He's been working steadily ever since his maiden win back in October. And now the Sham. It looks like the Sham on January 4 will be his next start. And we're all excited to see what Honor AP can do in his stakes debut. A couple horses not making their stakes debut will run the same day down in South Florida, Matt. It's the Mucho Macho Man, which is probably my favorite stakes name of the year. Mucho Macho Man, January 4 at Gulfstream Park. And there's a couple of horses, I think a little bit off the radar right now, but very interesting nonetheless. The first one I want to mention is Chance It. It's not a currency swap. He's trained by the same guy that got some notoriety, Safi, for training Math Wizard to a big win in the Pennsylvania Derby. But Chancet has already started 5 times down there in South Florida. He's run some really fast races. He's actually got beat a couple times, but he looks like he's getting better and better. Hasn't run worse than second. And if you look at the speed figures, Chancet just might be for real.
Yeah, Brian, that's for sure. And hey, and I think you and I see Mucho Macho Man run in Florida at Gulfstream Park a few years ago. But anyway, I digress. But yes, I agree about Chancet is certainly getting better. 2 wins in his last 2 starts for Safi Joseph, who is based down there at Gulfstream Park. So a little bit of home field advantage there. There's also talk that South Bend is going to make a return in the Mucho Macho Man, which I guess kind of turns out to be Florida Derby Trail prep race because there are no points on it, but it often attracts good fields that are getting ready for the Holy Bowl and or the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby down at Gulfstream. South Bend was a bit of a disappointment in Kentucky when he went into that race 3 for 3 for trainer Stanley Huff and Sagamore, but things just didn't go right that day. I've heard, he was really wound up pre-race and kind of left a good bit of his race before they started. So they may give him another chance in the Mucho Macho Man to see if he could get the pieces back together in there. And also, a horse popped up just the other day at Gulfstream for Ralph Nix, named Untitled, who blew away a field of Florida breds by, I think, 11 lengths, got a big speed figure, and Nick says his phone is ringing off the hook with people who want to make a private purchase, so he's not sure if he'll continue in his barn, but I think if he does, there's a chance we could see him at the Mucho Macho Man.
Yeah, could be an interesting horse there. And getting back to South Bend, I really do like South Bend a little bit. You mentioned he wasn't quite himself in the Kentucky Jockey Club last time when he finished out of the money, but don't forget that was also a sloppy track. He's got 3 nice wins before that, and he beat some good horses before that. So South Bend could be another horse, son of algorithms, as you mentioned, for Stanley Huff that could bounce back. So Chancet and South Bend pointing for that, maybe Untitled too. We'll see what happens. The Mucho Macho Man is also the first weekend of January 4 at Gulfstream Park. And speaking of a horse that South Bend beat, I already mentioned he beat Answer In by a nose in Answer In fact, both of their debut performances. He also beat a horse in the street sense, I guess it was, at Churchill Downs when South Bend became a stakes winner named Shotsky. And Shotsky is a horse with a ton of distance breeding for trainer Jeremiah O'Dwyer. Shotsky kind of came from out of the blue. He was 1 for 3 going in, but he went wire to wire in the Remsen, Matt. Shotsky looks like a horse who likes the distance. Obviously, he won the Remsen, which is 9 furlongs. He is earmarked to start out his 3-year-old season at Fairgrounds down in New Orleans, and the Lecomte. The Lecomte is the next race we're talking about. It's not until January 18. But is Shotsky a horse you could see making some serious noise on the Kentucky Derby Trail?
I do, Brian. And you mentioned the Remsen at 1 1/8 miles, which is a lot of distance at that point for 2-year-olds. It was a big field in the Remsen. It was a good balanced field in the Remsen. There were a lot of horses coming in there that had pretty good performances on their past performances, as was the case with Shotsky. And you have to like the way he won that race, flashing speed in there and going wire to wire on a really tiring track at Aqueduct. So that not only points out his pedigree to go long, but the ability to carry his speed. And that is a very important feature for serious Kentucky Derby contenders.
Yeah, and I like Blame. The jury's still out for me how good Shotsky is, but looking back, the street sense he was beaten less than 2 lengths at Churchill Downs. One fascinating thing I see about this horse, he's had 4 races and it's been 4 different racetracks, which is kind of interesting. And you're right about Aqueduct, 9 furlongs on that track at Aqueduct lately. That is a distance test, and Shotsky was up to it, becoming a graded stakes winner last time in the Remsen. Look for him in the LeCompte again, January 18th at Fairgrounds. We're going to move forward a little bit more. We're just going to talk about a few horses of note. We're still over a month away from some of these races, but let's mention them at least, Matt. Storm the Court. He's had a strange career. He might be a 2-year-old champion. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the Eclipse Award voting, but Storm the Court, a son of Court Vision for trainer Peter Eurton, is only 2 for 4. One time he didn't finish the race, and another time he was beaten by 8 rings. But he was a nice maiden winner, and then of course he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile at big odds. His next race is scheduled to be February 1, Santa Anita. It's the Robert B. Lewis.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting to see. Typically over the last many years historically, the Breeders' Cup juvenile winner has not won the Kentucky Derby. But hey, at this point, we're only talking about gathering up points to get into the field. And should Storm the Court win the Robert B. Lewis, he's going to have 30-some points already, and probably will be the first horse who's got a spot locked up.
Yeah, and there'll be other good horses in the Robert B. Lewis. We wanted to mention the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Like him, love him, or don't believe in him yet. The truth is he won the biggest 2-year-old race of the year last year. Storm the Court, the son of Court Vision. Okay, on the same day, again, we'll go from Southern California to Southern Florida, the Holy Bull. And you see a horse pointing for the Holy Bull, Matt, and it's a horse I thought could have been the 2-year-old champion. Talking about the big winner of the Champagne, Tiz the Law, another son of Constitution. He didn't quite get it done, though, when he went out to Kentucky, Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Jockey Club last time.
Yeah, Brian, and you mentioned when you were talking earlier about that being a sloppy track, and things just didn't go the way they planned in that race. He got stuck down on the inside, and we talked about how tough that is for 2-year-olds. Didn't get the best of trips, and still finished third. So by no means do we want to dismiss the chances of Tiz the Law, and I look forward to seeing him in his next start.
Yeah, and he's actually, most of us remember the magical run that the other New York bred, Funny Side, went on years ago. Of course, this is Saratoga Stable. This is Barclay Tag, the same connections as Funny Side. And it's interesting because Funny Side's first 2 races were just so darn impressive. And then his third race, he struggled against a New York bred to end the year, and it was just a little bit disappointing. It took him a while to get going at 3, but when he did, of course, he won the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. Tiz the Law, let's not look at this third race of Tiz the Law too harshly, Matt, because he really was just kind of behind a wall, pocketed in there, didn't have room for a while in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Maybe he didn't burst through when he finally had some running room, but he was beaten less than a length. That's his only loss. The maiden race at Saratoga, the Champagne, were super impressive. I think get a loss out of the way, get more racing experience. Tiz the Law, I think, still has to be one of the highest rated 2-year-olds in the country in my eyes. He's getting a little freshening, as is Storm the Court, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner right now. But they've targeted the Holy Bull as his return race, February 1 at Gulfstream Park. And a few weeks later, we're really going into the future here, Matt, but bear with me. 4 weeks later at Gulfstream Park is the Fountain of Youth. And another horse being freshened right now is a horse maybe we talked about more than any other 2-year-old last year, and that's Dennis's Moment. So impressive at Ellis Park. So impressive winning the Iroquois at Churchill Downs for trainer Dale Romans. Breeders' Cup Juvenile is just one of those things, Matt.
Yeah, Brian, just, for those of us that have liked Dennis's Moment, we're more than willing to draw a line through that Breeders' Cup juvenile. And he had a little bit of time off on the farm. He just got back to the Dale Romans barn this past week, so they'll bring him along. And February 29th in the Fountain of Youth at Gulfstream Park is the goal for Dennis's Moment. And I think that might be the weekend of the next Kentucky Derby Future Wager. I'll have to check, but that may be the weekend for that.
No, I'm not sure about Matt. You know that schedule better than me. And Matt, we talked about a few horses here who are currently freshening. Storm the Court, 'Tis the Law, and Dennis's Moment. And these races are literally 6, 8, even 10 weeks away from now. So you never know for sure. But it's important, I think, on this Kentucky Derby Trail for things to go right for the horses. They don't want a lot of hiccups as they're getting closer to the Kentucky Derby. So it's nice that their connections have kind of really mapped out a plan. And that's what we're talking about here with Storm the Court and the Robert B. Lewis, 'Tis the Law in the Holy Bull, and of course Dennis's Moment in the Fountain of Youth. We also covered several preps that'll be happening in the next few weeks, and Matt, we know a little bit more firmly the headliners that Matt and I talked about there. And then, of course, we talked about the Los Al and the Springboard Mile, 2 races, Los Al Futurity, Springboard Mile, where I think Kentucky Derby horses will come out of. Remember, Matt, I like Answer In. You're not going to forget that, are you?
I will not. I think we'll hear about it certainly over the next few weeks.
And knowing me, you will hear about it, yes. All right, Matt, that's our Kentucky Derby preps look. Like we said, it's 135 days away still. A little over 19 weeks, but people want to talk about Kentucky Derby. Matt and I are happy to go over the horses that are most talked about on that trail. We'll keep doing it for the next 4 months right here on Horse Center. Hey, Matt, can I get a closing shot from you today?
Absolutely, Brian. As I mentioned before, I want to wish all of the Horse Center fans a happy and healthy winter holiday season. And of course, I want to do the same for our crack producer, Brett Workman.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year from Matt and I here at Horse Center. We, of course, will be back next week, and we'll keep running every week through the holidays, so we look forward to that. But an early happy holidays to you all. Thanks for watching every week. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so. Thanks to our sponsor, Matt. They're the best contest site out there. That's Derby Wars. Folks, we'll be back next week with another big show right here on Horse Center. See you then.